Associate Attorney General Vanita Gupta, thank you very much for coming to the Sunday Show.
Great to be here, Jonathan. Thank you for having me.
So Attorney General Merrick Garland on Friday delivered an incredible speech, powerful speech about voting rights. Why did he feel it was important, one, to deliver the speech, and two, to be so full-throated in his defense of voting rights now at this point?
Well, I think that you heard a lot of passion from the Attorney General about voting rights because he wanted to really emphasize the incredible struggle that this country has had throughout our history to protect and expand the franchise. And I think there's no question that right now we are experiencing enormous challenges to our democracy. Some might even say that we're in a crisis on voting rights. We are having over a dozen states that are passing laws that are curbing voter access around the country. We're dealing with levels of disinformation that are causing people to have a lot less trust. It's really undermining public confidence in our elections and in our democracy. And it was really important for the Attorney General to speak forthrightly and boldly about all of these issues and to say that the Justice Department is going to use every tool at our disposal to protect voting rights, which are really the foundation for all other rights that any of us have in this country.
Vanita, let me get you to talk more about the assault on voting rights right now. It's especially important that we're talking to you because I think it was between 2014 and between 2014 and 2017, you were the head of the Civil Rights Division during the Obama administration. Given your experience then, is right now what's happening, the assault on voting rights, is it worse now than it's ever been given your tenure?
Well, I would say that right now we are dealing with a pretty significant set of challenges, and we don't have all of the tools that we used to, Jonathan, at the Justice Department to protect voting rights. I came into the Justice Department when I was the head of the Civil Rights Division in 2014 in the aftermath of the Shelby County decision, which really gutted the central tool that the Justice Department had to protect voting rights, to fight racial discrimination in voting. And we were left with a much more kind of, a weakened set of tools, but it was still important that the Justice Department be able to defend voting rights then when we were seeing a spate of laws being enacted after the Shelby County decision. I think what is particularly pernicious about the moment that we're finding ourselves in now is not only the series of laws that are getting enacted in states around the country that are curbing voter access, they're doing so on the basis of complete lack of evidence for why they may be necessary. And the Attorney General spoke to this yesterday. He spoke about the fact that both intelligence agencies in the last administration and this one, every state and federal court that considered the question of whether fraud had infected our elections found decisively no. And yet that is what is being used to justify the passage of laws to curb voter rights. And so it's why it's so important right now that the Justice Department yesterday is going to be announced that we would be doubling the staff of the voting rights enforcement section, that we are going to be, issuing guidances about the federal laws that are in place to protect against some of the most abnormal audits that we're seeing take place around the country that truly undermine public confidence in our nation's elections and our democracy. We are very aware of the scourge of violent threats against state and local election workers. These are everyone from secretaries of state, the Reuters piece yesterday that documented in great detail threats that Secretary of State Raffensperger in Georgia has been experiencing with his family, to volunteer poll workers who do this work, who are democracy workers, keeping the polls open for you and me and getting little to no pay, and the kinds of threats that they're facing. The federal government is taking those very seriously and will be investigating and prosecuting them where necessary. And we're scrutinizing every state law that is curbing voter access to determine whether they're violating federal law and where where the facts and the law call for it, you will see us in court. And so this is why we are, in the middle, I would say, of a pretty significant set of challenges to our democracy. Nobody can deny that. And it is the history of the Justice Department, founded in the aftermath of the 15th Amendment to protect the right to vote, Black Americans in particular, that we have to return to that mission and do everything that we can.
Actually, you mentioned Mr. Raffensperger. Let's have a listen to something that he said on Thursday about the threats.
This is not acceptable behavior to threaten the wives, the children, the family of people that work for the government, or even the government workers. They didn't sign up for this. It seemed apparent to us that they were basically casing our house, seeing what kind of security measures we had. And so we just decided that we'd take an early Thanksgiving vacation, and that's what we did.
Vanita, let's talk about some of these laws that are being passed and introduced. The Brennan Center for Justice reported last month that there have been 389 bills that have been introduced in 48 states. 14 laws have been enacted in 22 states. The Attorney General talked about some of the tools that he could use to blunt these. Let's have a listen to that and talk about it on the other side.
We will use all existing provisions of the Voting Rights Act, the National Voter Registration Act, the Help America Vote Act, and the Uniform and Overseas Citizens Absentee Voting Act to ensure that we protect every qualified American seeking to participate in our democracy.
Vanita, will that be enough? And I'm thinking, especially if the For the People Act, S1, or the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which is H.R. 4, don't get passed. S1 is sitting in the Senate and might not get passed, and H.R. 4 hasn't even been introduced.
Well, the Attorney General yesterday spoke to that. So, and as I said, the Shelby County decision took away the Justice Department's central tool to protect voting rights. He called, as has the president, for Congress to enact S1, the For the People Act, and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act to give us the tools that we need in this country to protect voting rights for all Americans. There is no question that some of the voting rights problems that we are seeing today, our federal laws do not sufficiently protect as they stand. And so we are supporting the call for the passage of the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act so that we can do all we can to protect voting rights and ensure that the bedrock of our democracy is upheld and uplifted.
And so, Vanita, if S1 and if H.R. 4 never make it to the president's desk for his signature, how concerned should we be for the foundation of our democracy?
Well, the Attorney General yesterday quoted Congressman Lewis, who was quoting a lesson that he learned from Dr. King, which is that democracy is not a state, it's an act. We can't wait for Congress to pass the legislation. We will be supportive of that passage and provide assistance for, the kind of technical assistance that the Justice Department always provides to uphold the Constitution through legislation. But we can't hold back, and we will do everything that we can, whether it's through enforcement, through our enforcement guidance, through criminal enforcement around threats of violence. We will work with other agencies to combat the scourge of disinformation and ensure that voters have accurate information in order to exercise this foundational right. And so we won't wait, but it is really important to recognize that these tools have been limited over the years, and it's why it's so important right now that Congress take voting rights legislation up in order to protect the voting rights of all Americans in this country.
Associate Attorney General Vanita Gupta, thank you very much for coming to the Sunday Show.